Yes.
Am I correct?
Yes. So some of the other, one of the main things is this final clarifier out here near, and this is Memorial Park right here. This clarifier has moved around some, but for phase 1 and phase 2, this clarifier would be in the same spot, and it's kind of the key component to our overall site plan. So I'm going to flip. So this is what phase 1 would look like, and so then we'll go to phase 2 with the full build out. The full total project cost of this is the $37 million project. So this clarifier is still in the same spot, and then we're able to add the other clarifiers over here on the east side of the plant. And you can see that we found a way, because of these structures, we know the size of them, and they actually got a little bit smaller when we got into design and got into the details of the building, and whether we make it 2 floors or 1 floor, where we got into the details of the structure, and we're able to fit this portion over here that we considered moving public works, but we can find these to the raw water pump station and the excess flow facility down in this area, and our 3 clarifiers over here with the tertiary filters and effluent pump station here. So we're able to fit it, and we want to offer this alternative that we haven't spent a whole lot of time talking about during the feasibility study, but we've developed it through our preliminary design so far. So in essence, it's one alternative to keep the public works and keep Memorial Park. And this is what it would look like more in an aerial view. We know that there's obviously concerns about how it looks along Irving Park, and just as a concept of something that you could do to help shield the final clarifier and improve the aesthetics. This access road is a new component that we're just now developing. Moving this further to the east opens up a little bit more room here to allow for room for the pump station, the excess flow. The access road previously was over here. So that's something that we want to, and I guess, feedback or talk about. That's essentially where we are right now. I know there's other questions, so this is kind of the path that we started to go down, but you needed to bounce that off council.
I will. Is that all for your presentation right now?
We have other things to address questions as we go, but that's the formal presentation.
All right, that's okay. So we will ask questions
Yep.
about this now. Alderman Cadal.
I think this is an appropriate time. While that aerial, that doctored aerial photograph is up, the one furthest to the right, the clarifier that gets added closest to Irving. Near as I can tell, the location of that is behind that existing row of evergreen trees. Does that sound correct? I'm going for an aesthetics question here.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe these are existing.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
These are the existing evergreens
Right.
that we're proposing.
How tall is this clarifier? 2 questions. How tall is the structure at its footing, at its baseline in the ground, and how tall is it from the crown of Irving Park Road?
From the crown of Irving Park Road, the wall is about 3 feet higher. From grade, this is a low spot. It was compensatory storage for when they built the park. We're planning to continue to allow water to pond around the structure. So from grade, we have about 6 feet exposed.
6 feet exposed. And John, how tall do you think those existing evergreens are right now? They're at least 12, right? Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Alderman Police.
Couple quick questions on the existing plant. I had a discussion with our engineer last week. Basically, 80%, the city puts themselves on notice. At 90%, I think EPA puts us on notice. Is that correct, Mr.? And then 100%, well, basically the city's done. Right now, I'm hearing that we're doing about 78%. Is that correct, John?
Right there.
Oh, he's got it
It's on the
right there.
graph. Ed, you want to go through that chart that you just flipped on the flow calculations?
And this is just the bottom part of the last page of the packet, additional information that we gave you. The information we gave you includes the flow numbers above there that were used to calculate these percentages that we have here. We've got 3 columns in here. The first one is how IEPA rates your facility, and this is based on what's called the average day flow, which is your 3 low flow months in the past year, divided by your design average flow, that's your permitted capacity at the plant. Right now, North Plant is running at 78%. South Plant is running at 68% of those capacities as related to the 3 low flow months. The center column is the average flow. This is what you would typically see coming into that plant every day. Some days are higher, some days are lower, but this is your annual average. At average flows, we're at 95% of the permitted capacity of the plant. And when Brad mentions that he's running close to full capacity there, it's because his average flow that he's seeing every day is real close to what that plant is permitted to discharge. Now, regarding when IPA gets concerned, IPA has 2 kind of categories. When you get to 80% of your permitted capacity, and that's when, this is how they rate it, your average day flow, your ADF, rather, divided by that, you become on a critical review list. When you get to 100%, you have to have plans in place and begin your expansion to handle that capacity. They will not issue you any more connection permits. At the 80% stage, you have to start the planning process and convince them that you are taking the steps you need to increase the capacity when it's required.
Does everybody understand the ADF? It's a special formula that EPA uses where it looks at the 3 lowest months of the year. Not real sure why they do that, but
April, May, and June, I believe. I don't know. Is that April, May, and June?
It depends on your monthly flow readings for the previous 12 months. They take the 3 lowest flow months, and that is what they consider as your typical raw sewage domestic load coming into the plant with the least amount of infiltration and inflow from leaking pipes. And that's what they think is your sewage loading, and so that's why they use that rating. The third column we have here is what we're really looking at is kind of the functional capacity of your plant. And while your permit says, at South Plant, you can discharge, quite a bit more than what that plant can really process. South Plant's limited by its solids handling capacity. At North Plant, it's also limited. North Plant's really limited at what it's permitted for now. So there we are actually, your average flow divided by what your plant's functional capacity is, we're at 95%. South Plant, we're at 88% of its capacity of the average daily flow it's seeing and what is really functional capacity is.
Alderman, please, you have a follow-up on that?
But right now, we don't have a restrictive license. We're close, not quite. 90% would be the restricted,
80%, you're on the critical review list.
but not restricted license.
Well-
At 90%, then, from what I understood, we're at restricted.
We're at 78% right now.
You're at 78%
Right,
on North Plant. Your average day flow, ADF,
right.
so
But
you're
my-
below the 80%.
The follow-up is, when I first got on, I know they were trying to sell me on a new plant, brand-new plant and all that stuff. And the public works director at that time was telling me, well, we're pushing at 90%. Now, do we know what it was? I mean, back 3 years ago, the economy was a little better, not much, but it was on the brink of turning. And maybe that's why we're at 78. John, I don't know if you would know those numbers. Brad's not here. I was hoping he was here tonight. Were we at that, on the average day flow, were we close to, because I remember Gary saying something like 88 or 92%, but, I don't recall what are,
Yeah, these numbers that were used for the average flow actually go back to 2006 through current.
so 78
it's-
is
Yeah,
good number.
2007, 2008, 2009 numbers have been used to generate, the average flow numbers.
Okay.
I guess what this is trying to show you is, if you look at it with EPA's formula, we're at 78% capacity, but if you ask Brad and how much additional capacity he has, he's not going to say he has 22%. He's going to say he's got 5% capacity before, to be able to take on future growth or expansion or whatever.
Go ahead,
Thank you.
Christine, with your
So in your exact example, the 5 additional % would then put the actual functioning at 78%. The left column, right? Because right now we're at 95%, so we only have 5 more % to go to get to where we're over our limit, right?
Over what the plant can, the capacity it has to handle additional flow.
And the actual capacity is 78%, right?
Looking at it with EPA's formula and how they look at their critical review
Yeah.
and how their thought process is. They take out, this tries to boil it down to just pure wastewater and not any I&I or anything else that your system has.
So are we over 78%?
No, I think we're taking those 3 months flow, we're still at 78%. We'd still come up with that same number if we calculated it with today's numbers. Is that what you're
Okay.
saying? Or
Yeah, or even
recent-
those numbers there, like, is it that, are we at 95% of total capacity, or are we a little below 78% of total capacity? I'm not clear.
What the plant sees, its average day for every year, you're at 95% of what the plant can handle is the amount of water that's coming through it.
Okay,
And one of the limiting factors at this plant is its clarifier, and which really is related to the flow rate that's coming through as opposed to how much waste loading is coming through.
okay,
What this number looks at is the waste loading coming
Okay.
into it. This one really looks at hydraulically how much is coming through the plant. And you're at 95% capacity on any typical day. Some
Okay.
days you're at much higher flows, some days you're much lower flows. But that's where he's seeing his average flows are at 95%.
okay, and how much waste do you think is actually going through there?
You're at 78% of the waste loading that the plant can handle.
I see, okay, thank you, okay, I understand now.
Mayor Johnson.
I just want to clarify to make sure the information is totally accurate. My understanding from the plant personnel is, I noticed you're choosing 2008 figures, is that our flow rates are down to rates we haven't seen in the last 10 years. So if you use the 2010 numbers, what are the percentages? Given the fact that we have all these foreclosures throughout our community, the industrial park doesn't produce as much as it used to. Haven't the flow rates actually gone down?
I don't have those answers right now. We don't have those flow readings with us. And this was developed using the information in the feasibility study that we'd use for developing that. So I currently don't have the answer to that question.
I think it'd probably be important we get that update and deal with the actual numbers we're facing today.
Okay.
I know they're down, I don't know what the actual numbers are.
Only short.
Yeah. We received engineering's option of probable cost dated October 15th, 2010. And I'm just curious now, there's a phase 2 that says it meets future anticipated limits at a total cost of $20 million. rather than this $38 million. Is this correct, or?
Yeah, that was a previous version where we had it in 3 phases, but to simplify things, we've made it into 2. It's, we have different treatment units that we can do at different phases. That phase 2 that's shown there includes phase 1 plus these 2 units.
But
So we
it's-
can get into that discussion at some point too, how much you want to be in phase 1, if you want to phase 2, 3, 4, just how many phases you want to have.
Yeah, I think when we had the meeting, we asked the question, well, can't we get more MPGs, but not so much at a lower cost? And somebody said that the cost would still be quite close to the $38 million. But here, the difference here is 11 million or 20 million or 38 million. And I'm just wondering, why did we discard the 20 million when it sounds, I don't know, but it sounds like it might be a good compromise because it does meet future anticipated limits.
Yeah, the phase 2 didn't increase capacity though. It increased your treatment, the quality, but it didn't. Phase 2,
When it says anticipated,
that's limits, that's water quality, that's quality and not quantity.
It's quality.
So essentially, we're trying to guess what the limits are. So we can build, if we build this, we'll be able to meet more limits than we can without it.
okay, it's just still confusing.
Alderman Police.
Yeah, I think what Alderman Shockey's talking about, we have in one of the previous meetings, you guys gave us this, leaving the plant without the expansion, 1.97, but tertiary filter building, GBT building, that was the $9 million. They brought it up to that 20 million. That's adding the filters.
Yeah, that was, looking at a condition of meeting the future limits that we would have for total nitrogen removal, total phosphorus, and the lower TSS limits and BOD limits that we would be seeing, and other metals that might be in there that we can, any solids to filter out. What it includes is what's in phase 1 here, these items, upgrades to the raw water pump station, existing station, the digester, aeration tank and secondary building, and 1 clarifier that's in our phase 1. And then it would keep the 2 existing clarifiers operational, and it would add the tertiary filters and UV treatment. By adding these on, we can meet those future lower limits that we anticipate coming. And that cost includes, what we have here are the costs for the different unit processes that were described. And it's, when we add the roughly a 6.8 million for these 2 structures to that existing phase 1 project. And that would get you to your lower limits, but no increase in capacity of flow.
Hey, fella.
Follow.
I'll be honest with you, the increased capacities, for me, is not the big issue here. Because number one, we're looking at what I think is the Band-Aid solution of $11 million on the 1 plant. That's for the first plant, for the north plant. Nobody here is even talking about the south plant. What's the Band-Aid solution over there? Is it gonna be $5 or $6 million? So we're gonna spend 16, 17 million. I'm not sure what that, if you expanded the north plant and did the full-blown treatment plant, the bottom line is, and you shut down the south plant, because let's face it, we don't know what the Thorndale corridor is gonna do. May never happen. There would only be a 10 and 3/4 increase if you did the full-blown plan here, the $38 million, $36 million, whatever it is, and shut down the south plant, we'd still have a 10 and 3/4% more, plus we'd have a brand-new plant. Because I'm hearing stuff, I wasn't at the meetings, some of the other aldermen were there. If we shut down one of the clarifiers, we have to shut down the plant because we can't work on one clarifier without shutting down the other one. From what I was told. Now, I don't know if this is true. Then I heard the other day, we're unloading a high amount of mercury, and I don't know if we've been called by IEPA or whatever on that, or what I'm not sure what's going on there.
Back to your first question regarding shutting down South Plant and sending the flows up here. There's a couple of issues with doing that. One of them is for your average day flow, you would have the capacity here. But South Plant has an excess flow facility and has designed peak hour flows that this plant upgrade could not handle all of the flows from south. And you
Wait.
can't.
Okay. So you're telling me if we expanded this plant, we couldn't handle, it's a 10 and 3/4 increase over the two plants. We're looking at 3.1 MGDs, from what I was told, to 3.47. It couldn't handle it?
It can't handle the peak storm flows that South Plant sees. Our flow rates coming into this plant are 14.5 MGD storm flows. South Plant also has very high storm flows coming in there. There's the excess flow facility that takes that clean storm water that's coming into the system, minimally treats it, disinfects it, and then discharges it. It's those high flows that we could not handle at this plant. The plant expansion, we're not allowed to increase the capacity of our excess flow facility. We have to keep our current capacity of what's there, which is 6.12 MGD at this plant. So that's the excess flow after we're treating 8.4 MGD through the rest of the plant. That gets us up to 14.5. Those are, the storm flows, the peak flows that are coming in through the collection system. And those are the ones, South Plant has very similar peak hour flows and excess flow conditions. And it's very difficult to handle those up here because we can't expand this excess flow capacity. Does that answer that question a little bit regarding, the design for this wasn't to bring South Plant flows up here. It was looking at new domestic sewage flows from new systems that have limited I&I because of the new constructions that would be used on them. And then this can handle that increase in your domestic sewage flow.
Mayor Johnson.
Try to summarize this. If we plan Phase 2, the option not relocating the Veterans Park, and build Phase 1 at this time, is that included in 11.3, or what are we talking about? The full build-out, the design for the future, but build for our needs today, what's the price tag?
Yeah, this is 11.3 million, where we take care of some key issues that Brad has at the plant, this being one of the main ones, the clarifiers, and we add some additional aeration capacity, and we take care of his most critical needs. And then this puts us, this clarifier, if we do go to Phase 2, will still be used, and it all fits into the total scheme, the total build-out. And everything we've done, we've tried to minimize the amount of rework and money lost from going from Phase 1 to Phase 2. But yeah, this clarifier would be in the same spot and be used for Phase 2.
So you can fully expand and build out at a future date if the need arises.
Correct.
Alderman Short.
I'm a little confused here.
Okay.
Here
one
we're,
of those?
we're showing
You ain't got one of those.
3 of these.
Oh, yeah.
Clarifiers.
I got,
Okay, no, put that page back up again. That, just stay with, but stay with this one, right. Here we're having 3 clarifiers, that's what they're called.
yes.
Okay. And I understand we can't build, because the 2 small ones, we can't build a large one without closing down at least one of the small ones or both of them? What I'm getting to is, does it make any sense, instead of putting this one in here, can't we build this larger one, and then after that's finished, take out the other small one and put in just 2 larger ones over here? And would that capacity be enough for both total water and phosphates and everything else that I don't understand?
The option of 2 large diameter clarifiers with this arrangement here do not fit on the site with the restrictions we have from the floodway and our wetland buffer issues that we've got to deal with. We can't, the larger ones get very large. It's a 90-foot diameter as opposed to a 65-foot diameter. So to reach the expansion capacity that we're designing for, we need 3 65-footers is what can fit with the constructability of, we'd build this one first, and we'd operate with these 2 and this one.
What would the increase in capacity if you had those 2 65s over the 2 small ones we have now? Without the third one along Irving Park Road?
About 500, a little less than 500,000 gallons a day.
And what would that do to our percent figures then?
Well,
When you're talking about the last page.
it's hard to say because that wasn't one of the parameters we were looking at or the conditions we were evaluating and designing for. If we were to look at designing for a different number than the ones that we had generated in a feasibility study, a number of things would change, not just the clarifiers. If you were to limit to just 2 larger, 65-foot diameter clarifiers, now you would look at redesigning your pump station, redesigning your grit and your digesters, and resizing a lot of the components in here, not just the clarifiers, if that's what you wanted to design for. And that was, in the feasibility study, we went through the flows that we were looking at and designing for to get, concurrence that this was the system we wanted to design.
But in the past, you've mentioned that one would give us enough for 40,000 more people, which I don't see that ever happening. That I heard that figure before, that would additional 40,000. I don't know who said it, but I heard it, somebody said it. I'm just saying, if we could design it for another 15,000.
Backing up a little bit, a 1.5 MGD expansion is the equivalent of adding 15,000 people to your population.
So couldn't we do that and stay within the government restrictions?
Our current design is to add 1.5 MGD.
With which plant?
This expanded plant goes from 1.97 to 3.47. So we're adding 1.5 MGD. So we're adding the capacity for 15,000 people.
Okay, then I misunderstood that figure. I don't know where I got that from then. But there's no, I'm trying to just figure out if there's a less expensive way to design it for enough reasonable increase in people in the future and not design something for $800,000 that in 20 years before we do it, all the technology will be different and we'll have to do that study all over again anyway. Do we want to do the design for this if we're going to build this? And aren't we in a way wasting the money for designing this if it's going to change anyway in the future? And it could change like somebody said, it changes day to day almost in the technology.
The level of design that we're working on for this is at the 30% design level is what we're contracted to complete. The 30% design for all this, the preliminary design stage, with the ability to do a portion of it that will phase in and be able to be expanded. So you're not paying for final design for this at this time. You're not paying for final design for these. We're paying for the preliminary design level only. And that was where we looked at breaking the contract up into a couple of phases.
Okay, yeah, let me stop you right there. That's what I think you touched on what I'm trying to figure out. If we design just for this, what would that design cost be? If we didn't, if we forgot about that? Just,
This goes back to when we were looking at our contract and what we have in here, and we're looking for the preliminary design contract. That was a 6-month project that would get us a preliminary design for alternative 5 at the time we were calling it. Now it's phase 1, which is a better terminology
Okay.
for it. And then phase 2 is the build out. And like Mark mentioned, there could be interim phases, or maybe a point where we really want to do a new lift station. The existing one has caused so much problems that needs to be a project. And that can be a separate project by itself at any time in the future. Most of these can, some of them are dependent upon, well, we got to build this excess flow before we can do the grit and the digester expansion because those 2 tanks are there and we got to get them out of the way. Okay, but, so you're paying for the preliminary design for all of it. If you wanted to do a final design for phase 1, it's an additional $415,000 to take that to completion, to get, the permits to go and build that. If you wanted to do final design for this one, for the entire project, it's an additional $1.19 million to get to there. It's a much more complicated project. You can see there are a lot more squares on the paper.
okay, so you're saying we do need the 800,000 design thing now?
The 800,000 gives you the best opportunity for not wasting anything in your phase 1 for coming to here. Like you say, technologies may change. We may look at, instead of additional clarifiers here, demolishing the 2 smaller ones and building these, maybe we expand and modify our filtration system and keep the 2 existing, keep these 3, and permit something here. Right now, IEPA doesn't have the design guidelines for that. They haven't permitted any, but it would be a new technology, and if you're willing to take the risk of proposing something new with them, that can be looked at. But right now, what we were looking at was, well, remember back, we had another alternative for a membrane system, an MBR system. State of the art, that's where things are going. It was $15 million more for that project. A lot of these newer technologies are going to be more expensive. There's no cheaper way to remove solids from water than a clarifier. It may not get all the solids out, that's where you may have to do your filtration. And that leads right into one of the other questions that Alderman Police asked about mercury. There's it's likely that is going to be a condition on a permit that you'll be getting soon for your NPDES permit. The way to do that is the technologies that we're proposing for here are very effective at removing mercury. It may need a tertiary filter in your phase 1 to meet that limit. That gets back to that phase 2 was to meet future limits, no increase in flow. We added the tertiary filters in the UV. The mercury limit that would be imposed could be met with our tertiary filters, and it gets you that point. It also will allow you to meet total phosphorus, total nitrogen, and your other limits that could be imposed.
I believe, if I am mistaken, we already got the permit or whatever we applied for, whatever we need to do. And I believe mercury was brought to our attention that we would have to do something with that mercury level to bring us down. Now, I did talk to Brad Kittleson about the mercury level that we would have to bring down because the state's going to require us to because there's so much coming through the treatment plant. He did add, in order to do that, we would have to add the filters, I believe, and the clarifiers, I believe, or the filters.
We have the filters, or we have the clarifiers. The filters.
We would have to add
would,
in.
would definitely help with that. That the limit, the permit hasn't been issued yet. This is just through our conversation with IEPA that they said, oh, by the way, there's going to be a mercury limit in your next permit. So we need to, be aware of that and prepare for that. There's other things that you can do with mercury and can go to the source, and there's some pre-treatment things that you can do to help mitigate that. But so we're still, we're not ready to for sure tell you that
Right.
we need filters for mercury,
But
but
keep in mind, the proposal that may happen if we go ahead and do the $11 million that is on the table that I'm sensing here. Keep in mind, those filter systems, if we have to go that route, is roughly what I heard, about $7 million, $8 million?
yeah, that's on, we have it itemized out. Yeah, just under 7.
So now you're looking at almost $19 million if we have to do something with that mercury level. Believe me, I don't know what else is going to come down there. Mr. Zahner, do you have a follow-up on that, or is there new stuff that came
Yes,
forward?
I do. They're really, the mercury concentration that they're talking about putting into NPDES permits is dealing principally with discharges of dental amalgam, and there are ways to pre-treat for that. He's absolutely correct. The Dental Association has taken some tremendous steps forward. Really what we're looking at here is a desire by federal and state agencies to try to remove mercury in